With the upcoming reboot of HBO's Harry Potter, I'm still seeing so many people asking the question, what did J.K. Rowling even do that was transphobic? Which is, to me personally, crazy, because even someone that has been semi-covering the conversation knows exactly what she's done. And yet people are still saying, can we separate the art from the artist? What even has she said that's transphobic, in both good faith and bad? So I decided to make a systematic encyclopedia of everything she did that was transphobic, going all the way back from the odd ominous tweet in 2017 to present day 2026. I'm going to try and cover as much of it as I can. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. Hello and welcome to Matriarch Archetype. I will be your goddess for today because we are breaking down everything J.K. Rowling has ever done that was transphobic. This is probably likely to be a series, but today we're going to hopefully cover a few things that happened in 2017, 2018, building up to 2019, and then what I'm calling in 2020 T-Day, where she really kind of said what she wanted to say and shit hit the fan. For my references for this video, there are a couple of articles online that also systematically cover everything that happened. I've taken from those, adding other references of my own, finding other things on Reddit and bits and bobs, but I will mostly quote those two articles. The one from them mainly really did a fantastic job systematically talking about what she did. So going to leave all of that in the description below, of course, but just kind of a nod and thank you to them for releasing that article. March 22nd, Rowling likes a post that refers to trans women as men in dresses. The author's PR team later chalked it up to a middle-age moment. Though she had never publicly said anything anti-trans at the time, her liked tweets raised suspicion among those who were paying attention. Now, so many people say liking a post isn't necessarily agreeing with an opinion, but I think there is something to be said about this. Like, I know myself as a content creator, like, I will make sure to watch through a video before liking it in case they say something wild at the end. I probably won't like something even if I enjoy it, just in case I don't know the creator. I do think there is a responsibility we have to have as people out there with any form of a public platform. In 2019, Rowling follows self-professed transphobe on X, at the time known as Twitter. She faced backlash for following the YouTuber Magdalene Burns on X. Burns was a self-professed transphobe who made videos with titles like "There is no such thing as a lesbian with a penis." Rowling later admitted she followed Burns because she wanted to contact her directly. So already we're seeing JK reach out to transphobic people, transphobic adjacent people, and one could be arguing, hey, maybe she's researching something for a book, maybe she's just making connections and networking, I don't know, but already the signs were there for people that were clever enough to see them. I do not include myself in that, but people were already aware of the old British lady living in a castle in Edinburgh, wondering what she was up to. Now, before we move to the next thing, let's take a little side note and talk about Maya Forstater, who will become a key stakeholder in JK's descent into transphobic madness, but she will also in her own right be a transphobic nightmare that many of us are just saddened by. On the 3rd of June 2019, Maya Forstater tweeted that pronouns are rehypnol. Important article by @hairyleggedharpy @UG Media Limited. Sure, sometimes preferred pronouns are polite, and we can be polite when we choose. But every woman has learned from experience that politeness is exploitable and can put us in danger. And the picture tweeted says, pronouns are rehypnol. They change our perception, lower our defences, make us react differently, alter the reality in front of us. They're meant to. They numb us, they confuse us, they remove our instinctive safety responses. They work. Again, this is a tweet about pronouns, which, bear in mind, everyone uses, not just to refer to themselves, but in all forms of linguistic nature. Even at this point, I can't understand how pronouns were such an issue when we use them all through our lives. The issue is that people can change and decide what pronouns that they prefer, and that, to people that probably just don't understand what that feels like or don't understand what it means to be a part of the trans community, is just mind-boggling to people. But to use that as an armed weapon and to frame that the same as ping someone else and using rehypnol as a date drug, I think is so demonic and so twisted, and it just shows through their mindset of and I'm talking about Maya Forstater in my opinion as well as J.K. Rowling, but just shows their mindset of connecting something they disagree with or don't understand with something that they understand to be negative. And we'll see that happen throughout this series. December 2019, Rowling supports that same anti-trans researcher and says men cannot turn into women. Rowling seemed to go beyond a middle-aged moment and made her support for known TERF Maya Forstater public. The former researcher was dismissed after tweeting that trans women could not change their biological sex, over which she sued her former employer and won. So we're building up towards T-Day, where J.K. Rowling comes out as a TERF. But so connecting herself to the Maya Forstater situation is very much already showing a support for a transphobic rhetoric. And I remember someone in my comments said, I can't find the exact one, but it said something like, let's not forget what Maya Forstater was actually doing. She was continuously, allegedly, in my opinion, misgendering someone at work who was, I think, a trans woman, and she was just calling that person a biological man, referring to them not as their pronouns, which is just transphobic. And if people want to say at this point, well, is that transphobic? People can't change their gender and stuff like that. That ideology in itself is transphobic. It's denying the existence of trans people and denying them the fairness to let them live their lives. So if you purposefully misgender someone, that is a transphobic action. I'm sorry. Just like calling someone the F slur is a homophobic action. So misgendering people on purpose is transphobic. We're not even like a few minutes into this series and she's already at least friends with transphobic people. She's transphobic adjacent, I like to say. And then of course we have T-Day, the day that J.K. Rowling comes out as a TERF. Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consulting adult who'll have you, live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real. I stand with Maya, this is not a drill. I remember this day very clearly. I remember I was working at a translation agency in London. I remember just being in disarray. Harry Potter to me was such an important series. I used to sleep with the books under my pillow. Some of you will have known this. I've covered this before. I loved Harry Potter, and I remember this feeling of it just being taken away from me. And all of my friends and my supporting, like, an understanding community were just like, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss. Like it felt like a grievance. Oh, she's come out as a TERF. I'm so sorry for your loss. Like, it was a bizarre time to be alive. I think as well, she also just really woke up and chose violence with this. Like I'm sure in her little castle, she had begun the descent into transphobic madness for, as what we can see, at least a couple years at this point. But from most people's perspective, this was just such an abrasive, sudden situation that happened. This obviously had quite a backlash, as you can imagine. And now in the second half of this episode, we're just going to talk about 2020 and all of the backlash from this. She doubles down midway through the year, and various cast members of the original Harry Potter series have to speak out and say that we don't agree with her views, which will ripple out into different effects throughout this entire series. May 2020. Rowling accidentally includes "fuck up some TERFs" in response to a child's drawing. Rowling, seemingly by mistake, replied to a post on X about a 9-year-old's drawing of a monster, the Ickabog, from the author's children's book of the same name. I love this truly famous Ickabog, with its bat ears, mismatched eyes, and terrifying bloodstained teeth. In court, Wolf claimed the Facebook post in which he said he wanted to fuck up some TERFs was just bravado. #the Ickabog. But the second half of the original post is more than a whoopsie. Internet sleuths quickly found the quote had come from a post referencing when Tara Wolf, a trans woman, misgendered by Rowling in her reply, was accused of assaulting Maria McLennan, who was at an anti-trans protest in 2017. People quickly expressed their suspicion that Rowling's copy and paste error further exposed her as someone who misgenders trans women. I'm mortified. This is what happens when you're not paying attention and accidentally cut and paste from an entirely different kind of message, the author wrote in reply to someone who'd pointed out the error. Now, something that we will also see is this extends out past just trans women and her misgendering of those people in the community, but also of non-binary folk as well, and the disallowing of those people's autonomy and right to exist. June 6th, the day before T-Day. Rowling can't comprehend people who menstruate. While there had long been talk of Rowling possibly being a TERF, the broader public had yet to label her as such. But the author's alleged anti-trans biases became impossible to ignore on June 6, 2020, when she mocked an article for using trans-inclusive language by referring to people who menstruate. People who menstruate? I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Wumben? Wimpund? Woomad? her mocking the phrase people who menstruate is innately denying the existence of non-binary people first and foremost, but trans men as well. A trans man menstruating is something that that man would have to deal with in society as being innately connected to feminine nature. And to use words like people who menstruate, we are just trying to cut that tie and trying to stop this hypothetical trans man from feeling discomfort, let alone also non-binary people that are people they don't define to a gender, or there's various different forms of non-binary people. For those people to be able to not be referred to their like biological sex or like AFAB and stuff like that because they menstruate is a key point of their existence. So people who menstruate is just, it to me, it's like a very logical progression of where language should have been all this time and isn't quite there yet. And that's a key thing that I want to make clear. Language has been crafted, it's a socially constructed thing, especially Western language like English we're talking about here. To not have a third gender, to not have a non-gendered form of speaking is just a flaw in its design. Non-binary people exist, and if J.K. Rowling already ignores that and denies that at this point, then she's instantly already transphobic just for that. But even if she's like, okay, I can't deny their existence, but I don't like the language that refers to them, that again is also transphobic in its action. It's like, hey, yeah, I know you exist, but I don't want to have to talk in a way that refers to you. And that's quite horrible if you really think about it. At 7 a.m, J.K. Rowling tweeted, "If sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth." Okay, and now we get to the if sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction situation, which I almost added this to the Alexis Blake deep dive I did because she reacted to a lesbian that talked about the same thing, but I didn't have enough space for it. Go and check that out if you haven't already. I did this deep dive of this creator, very internalized transphobia personified, but anyway, this isn't about her. Sex isn't real is also a straw man because it's not what we're saying. We're saying gender and sex are different. So for them to be different would imply that they are both real, just one is a social construct and one is a number of characteristics that we're born with. But the idea that if same-sex isn't real, then there's no same-sex attraction is I don't think for J.K. Rowling to discuss. She can talk on behalf of the lesbian community for sure, but as far as I know, she's straight, she's married to a man, she could be bisexual. That would be hilarious. That would be an ironic twist in this saga, but I don't think that it is in good faith that we get straight and cis people talking on behalf of another community. Posey Parker is another person that does this, allegedly in my opinion. She's seen to like pretend she's a lesbian to talk out against trans women even though she's not, and I think that there's something quite just dishonest there. This is obviously separate to the actual lesbian community that talk out about trans women. There's a small minority of them that do, but for J.K. Rowling to be saying this as well, it gives, in my opinion, kind of grasping at straws of what she can say that is she thinks going to be accepted, especially this early on in June 2020. I find a lot with the TERF talking points is that they will keep pushing the boundary of what they think science says is on their side. So originally it was like, well, you can't physically become a woman, but then people say, well, my hormones have done a great job at that. Look at the material, these are real boobs, Ed. So then they push it to like, okay, but you haven't changed your chromosomes. And then the discussion moved to, okay, well, what about intersex people? What about people that have chromosome differences that you don't know about? I haven't ever tested my chromosomes. I don't know what they are. You don't know what they are. You can't judge me based on that. Then it gets pushed to like female is someone that can have a baby. And then the argument quite rightly said, well, that's kind of a bit derogatory to women. They're not just baby making machines, and also there are cis women that can't have children. So then it moved to like, okay, but they have the facilities to make babies even if it's flawed. And we'll see this I think in 2024 where we get that wonderful meme of a chicken, because she was like, someone that has a system that can make eggs, but even if they don't work, that makes them a female. And then someone quote tweeted like, so you're talking about chicken, which was hilarious. With the same sex attraction conversation, it's also like, you're not purely attracted to someone's physicality. That can be a large part of it, and physicality is also made up of genitalia, which can also be a large part of a large part. It's like a system. Like, I am attracted to masculinity, men, and the physical form. My husband ticks all those boxes. So, but that doesn't mean to say that like if he had randomly like a female passport or female chromosome and I didn't know about it, that wouldn't change my attraction to what I already know of him. as well as the fact that attraction is physical and emotional, right? You are attracted to someone's personality just as much as their physical traits. Some more than others. There is a difference there between persons. Some people are more attracted to physicality. Some people are more attracted to emotions and personality types. So same-sex attraction doesn't negate sex. If anything, it just proves that we find attraction in various forms of someone's character, be that physical, be that personality-wise. So at this point, it just feels like J.K. Rowling is trying to find a gotcha moment that people will be like, oh yeah, you're right. If there's no sex, then there's no same-sex attraction, and that's homophobic. And it's luckily this didn't really take, but at this moment in time, it was a conversation that people really tried to cling to, especially the TERF lesbian community. They to this day still find it a point of contention. But I think I'd likely argue that the conversation has moved on past this because it's just fundamentally not true. Now, bear in mind, we have already seen quite a progression from 2017 to 2020, but even at this time, she was still trying to remain somewhat salient. At 7 a.m, J.K. Rowling tweeted, "If sex isn't real, there's no same-sex attraction." Hardly an hour later, she continued, "I respect every trans person's right to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. I'd march with you if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it's hateful to say so." So we go from this to in the future, her advocating and paying for policy that does literally legally discriminate against trans people. And so I can't imagine that she was marching for that to not happen if she was marching on the other side. So either this was at this point a dishonest tweet that was kind of her still masking her true TERF nature, or she has worsened in her opinions of transphobia and has dissented into this TERF madness, like I say. But it's not all that bad. We did have the original cast of Harry Potter start to speak out against her transphobia and say they don't agree with her opinions. June 8th, Daniel Radcliffe released a letter against Rowling's transphobia in partnership with the Trevor Project. "Transgender women are women," Radcliffe wrote. "Any statement to the contrary erases the identity and dignity of transgender people and goes against all advice given by professional healthcare associations who have far more expertise on this subject matter than either Joe or I." But what do writers do in crisis? They write. Let's talk about the essay that J.K. Rowling wrote to try and fuel the flames of the transphobic fire that she was lighting. June 10th, Rowling unleashes a 3,800-word anti-trans rant at the start of Pride Month. 2 days after Radcliffe's letter, Rowling published an essay to her website on June 10th, which has since been dubbed as many as her TERF manifesto. The essay elaborated on transphobic breadcrumbs she'd been dropping on social media for about 2 years. Posted to X with the simple caption, "TERF Wars," Rowling's essay delved into the pits of trans exclusionary radical feminist thought. As trans people pointed out at the time of Rowling's anti-trans manifesto, it was published just days after Ayanna Dior, a black trans woman in Minneapolis, was senselessly beaten in what appeared to have been a transphobic attack, and the killings of Tony McDade, a black trans man, and Nina Pope, black trans woman, in May 2020. June 10th, Emma Watson says trans people are who they say they are and deserve to live their lives without being constantly questioned or told they aren't who they say they are. She also made donations to UK trans organisations Mermaids and international feminist fund Mama Cash, encouraging her followers to do so as well. Honestly, Emma Watson will forever be my favourite through this whole entire series. All I've seen is her just continuously being a feminist and standing up for the trans community. Love you, Emma Watson. If you're out there and you see this, all my love to you. June 12th. Rupert Grint says he firmly stands with the trans community. In a statement to the Sunday Times, the Harry Potter star echoed the statements made by Watson and Radcliffe in response to Rowling's transphobia. "I firmly stand with the trans community and echo the sentiments expressed by many of my peers," he said. "Trans women are women, trans men are men. We should all be entitled to live with love and without judgment." I have a lot of respect for the cast that did speak out. Daniel Radcliffe goes on to do a lot more work, and I think that there is a lot to be said about the younger generation standing up to the older ones. I remember at the time as well, a lot of people said you should be grateful for the opportunity that she has provided by writing these stories. And to that I honestly say, she may have been involved in casting, but she wasn't the only one. She didn't handpick and scout these 3 people, and they in no way owe it just to her. They owe it to the franchise and what it became. But equally, you could spin it completely on its head. Can we not be so adult centric? And we could say that she owes them so much gratitude for being great child actors in a series that made her, I think, billions of pounds at this point. she very much owes them just as much as they owe her. I really hate this mindset of like, you should be grateful for the opportunities being given to you. It's like, she should be grateful that they can act as children. They were so young when they were first cast. June 14, staff at Rowling's publisher refused to work on her latest book. Tensions came to a fever pitch at Rowling's publisher Hachette UK when staff refused to work on the author's then forthcoming children's book, The Ickabog, after the author's increasingly public display of anti-trans sentiment. Employees expressed during a meeting with management that they were no longer prepared to work on a book after Rowling made her anti-trans beliefs public. An employee told the publication that the group was opposed to her comments and wanted to show support for the trans lobby. In response to the backlash, Hachette UK issued the following statement: "We fundamentally believe that everyone has the right to express their own thoughts and beliefs. We will never make our employees work on a book whose content they find upsetting for personal reasons, but we draw a distinction between that and refusing to work on a book because they disagree with an author's views outside their writing, which runs contrary to our belief in free speech." Again, we just have another example here of corporations choosing money over their staff and their people, and this is just pure neoliberalism at its worst, and it just gets worse from here. Recently in the news there was someone that set fire to a warehouse of, I think it was like toilet paper or something, saying whilst filming it, "You should have paid us more." And I feel like this was the earlier form of this. It was clear that publications and organisations and corporations are always going to side with money and capital, and we're seeing this now with HBO remaking the Harry Potter series. Even though there's a huge boycott moral backlash to it, they're still going to do it because it might make them money. And I just find that as someone that doesn't like capitalism, it's just so clearly unjust. But well done to the people that stood up to their morals and said, no, I'm not working on a project that is connected to this transphobia, even so early on as well. Hats off to you. And hats off to the authors that also quit the same agency that J.K. Rowling was with. June 22, 4 authors quit Rowling's literary agency. Several authors announced they were no longer working with the Blair Partnership, the literary agency that represents Rowling. They attributed their departure to the agency's lack of action after Rowling posted her Turf Wars essay on her website and to social media detailing her views on trans youth transitioning. The writers told The Guardian that when they reached out to Blair Partnership management to issue a statement that would reaffirm their commitment to transgender rights and equality, they were met with pushback and discontent. When leadership didn't condemn Rowling, the writers determined their only choice was to part ways with the agency. "We felt that they were unable to commit to any action that we thought was appropriate and meaningful," the author said. "We felt strongly about having an agency that supports our rights at all avenues and does not endorse views that go against our values and principles." Now, again, we get more of J.K. Rowling scapegoating the lesbian community. Am I using that word right? Potentially not. On June 7th, J.K. Rowling was also seen tweeting, "I've never felt as shouted down, ignored and targeted as a lesbian within our GLBT community as I have over the past couple of years," quoting an anonymous letter from a terrified lesbian. Under that, we can also see someone replied with, "Tell your fans who Robert Galbraith really was. Tell them who he was. He was a psychiatrist who pioneered gay conversion therapy. You are not an ally. You are a monster," and that will come up later. Using the lesbian community as an excuse to back her transphobia, and I'm sure she had TERF lesbians in her DMs and writing to her because they have a similar opinion. But to me, this just gets very desperate. It gets very icky. It gets very like, hey, I have someone that agrees with me and they're in the same LGBTQI plus community, so you must listen to what they have to say, even if they're not the majority in the lesbian community in itself. Like, I've personally had lesbians come up to me in my past, several actually, saying, "We love you, we support you, you're one of the girls, like you're one of us." And I think that that is the majority. I've heard statistically that's the majority as well, but in my personal lived experience, that is the majority. I don't think I've ever met a single TERF lesbian that said, like, to me, "You'll never be a woman." But then I guess I'm not really in those circles, so maybe I have a confirmation bias. Also in 2020, Rowling returned a award after being condemned for her statements. After Rowling received the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Ripple of Hope Award in 2019, the human rights group's president released a statement the following year expressing profound disappointment that the author had chosen to use her remarkable gift to create a narrative that diminishes the identity of trans and non-binary people. As a result, Rowling announced in August that she would return the award. The group's statement incorrectly implied that I was transphobic and that I am responsible for harm to trans people, Rowling said. "As a donor to LGBT charities and as a supporter of trans people's right to live free of persecution, I absolutely refute the accusation that I hate trans people or wish them ill." Well, that statement aged like milk. To me, giving back an award is also your way of saying I'm not going to change my opinion. I'm sure she could have said a statement and said, like, that doesn't reflect the truth of my views. Let me explain myself. But to give back the award is basically admitting defeat. No, it's basically saying, okay, yeah, that's what I think. And if you don't like that, you have your award back. That's crazy. She was 10 toes down at this point. We'll also see in the future people from Blue Sky being removed from the platform because they wished J.K. Rowling ill, even though she clearly does wish trans people ill because of all of the policies she goes on to fund and all of the transphobia she goes on to spew. So again, was she being honest in this statement, or was this just her trying to save face? Honestly, I don't know. On July 5th, Rowling compares transitioning to conversion therapy. Less than a week after Pride Month ended, Rowling was at it again. In a social media exchange, the author compared transitioning to anti-LGBTQ+ conversion therapy, adding this to the litany of anti-trans pseudoscience she had shared on social media just a month before. Users also pointed out how Rowling liked a post derogatorily comparing puberty blockers to antidepressants. Yes, they are sometimes necessary and life-saving, but they should be a last resort, not the first option. The original post read, pure laziness for those who would rather medicate than put in the time and effort to heal people's minds. In the now deleted thread, @TrinaScott wrote that Rowling endorsing the post by liking it was actively harmful to millions. Rowling said the original post misrepresented what she thought about mental health medications before posting a thread of her own that ended in more anti-trans misinformation. I've ignored fake tweets attributed to me and retweeted widely, she wrote on July 5th, 2020. I've ignored porn tweeted at children on a thread about their art. I've ignored death and rape threats. I'm not going to ignore this. When you lie about what I believe about mental health medication, and when you misrepresent the views of trans women, for whom I feel nothing but admiration and solidarity, you cross a line. In clarifying where she actually stands, Rowling went on to say that young people seeking mental health are being shunted towards gender-affirming care. Like we saw with the gay panic and protect the children and the rhetoric of like, well, okay, you do what you want as an adult, but don't let it happen to children. This same thing has been extended out to the trans community as well. And it's often done to kind of pull on people's heartstrings, especially if you have children yourself and you worry about their safety. Is purposefully done to push people into an emotional situation where they're feeling something through their gut, not their logical mindset, or also listening to science and what the doctors say. Because doctors and scientific professionals and researchers have said that puberty blockers are fine for children to go on. Social transitioning for younger children is fine. Transitioning for teenagers is fine. All of this thing is backed up by research and medical professionals, and done with caution and an understanding in a family situation and stuff like that. But the TERF community will apply this to be like irreversible harm. The book that talks about how women that are growing up and unable to have kids because they're being forced to transition. And it's like, if you fundamentally don't believe in transitioning being good for a person and trans people's right to autonomy and a life, the age that they do it is kind of irrelevant. They're just using that to apply their logic. And we can see this by how in the US, the anti-trans movement started with children and stopping children having access to gender-affirming care, saying, oh, we would never stop adults from doing this. We're just stopping the children from doing it. And then, shock horror to no one that's paying attention, they've rolled that out to adult gender-affirming care as well in certain places. And we now have Kansas where people are having to hand in their forms of ID if it doesn't have their birth gender on, or assigned gender at birth, connecting to their current self. And that is an entire genocidal can of worms that we'll get into maybe in another video. September 15th. Rowling says her latest villain is based on Buffalo Bill, the cross-dressing killer from Silence of the Lambs. She then took it right back. Rowling's novel Troubled Blood was published under the pen name Robert Galbraith. Trans-related content of the book aside, people have long speculated that Rowling's nom de plume has anti-queer roots and was inspired by the infamous LGBTQ+ conversion therapist Robert Galbraith Heath. Despite the nearly identical nature of the pen name and the name of the conversion therapist, the author said similarities between the two were purely coincidental. Any assertion that there is a connection is unfounded and untrue. When her novel Troubled Blood, under her nom de plume Robert Braith, was released on September 15th, 2020, she received significant criticism for featuring a villain based on dangerous transphobic tropes. First major review of the book laid out the plot. Detective Cormoran Strike investigates a series of murders committed by a cisgender man who hunts his female victims by dressing up as a woman. Rowling has repeatedly said that trans women are men pretending to be women to invade biological women's spaces. For instance, in her 3,800-word essay expressing these beliefs, she wrote, "When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he is a woman, then you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside." Now, like I said earlier in the video, we now see this character that she's used in this book, or created in this book, to just be pushing so many old transphobic and misogynistic tropes that I think they originated with like Psycho, with the kind of dressing up as your grandma situation, and then, you know, progressed into Silence of the Lambs, etc. If you don't see trans people as their assigned gender, you see them as their original gender, then you can assign the same data-driven acts that gender does that are bad. So talking, for example, like men are highly more likely to assault cis women, cis men, cis women. So like you apply that to trans women as well, then you can demonize and vilify the trans women in this situation. Cis men are known to do more violence against women generally, talking in general terms for a second. So how can the argument not be focused on the men that do that? And instead it's focused on the minority of trans women that maybe do that or do something adjacent, sometimes not even do that, or the small cases that don't speak to all trans women in general, that we are not a monolith and all people do crime, all different forms of demographic do a certain proportion of crime. So to be pinpointing on things that are a callback to what like cis men do, I think is very deliberate and just disingenuous, dishonest. But to then to write a book about it, I think, you know, but clearly by this point she's had this on her mind for years now, so I don't think this is an accident at all. But look around and find out, because people took action and they took her books off the shelves. September 17th, Rowling's books gets pulled from bookshelves and some stores due to her transphobia. In light of Rowling's exponentially more toxic spurts of transphobia during the summer of 2020, creatives and booksellers alike wanted to send a clear message that they did not stand with the once beloved children's book author. And it was at this point where people had to speak out and say they don't agree with her. What she was saying was so widely noted that you were either with her or you were against her. September 30th, 1,500 authors denounce Rowling's anti-trans comments. UK authors decided that they'd had enough of her potentially tarnishing the reputation of English-based writers. So in September 2020, over 1,500 UK creatives spoke out against the Harry Potter author's dangerous views on trans people and signed an open letter in support of trans rights. Culture is and should always be at the forefront of societal change. And as writers, editors, agents, journalists, and publishing professionals, we recognise the vital role our industry has in advancing and supporting the well-being and rights of trans and non-binary people. The September 30th letter reads, "We stand with you, we hear you, we see you, we accept you, and we love you. The world is better for having you in it. Non-binary lives are valid. Trans women are women, trans men are men, trans rights are human rights." Sadly, there were people that were with her, and there were people that clearly holded her views, and to this day there still are. GoFundMes were made in her honour to raise funds for the wealthy TERF. Half of the reason I'm making this series is because people are still asking me, what has she actually said that's transphobic? And my autistic brain is like, okay, I'm going to dedicate 3 weeks of my life to systematically putting that in front of you, to the point that if you still deny what she's doing is transphobic, you are doing it in bad faith, and I have to make that clear to people. Now as well, we can look back in hindsight and add different context to this year. Now, in a post found on Reddit, it also talks about her communications with notorious Peter Epstein, as well as Prince Andrew, allegedly in my opinion. She invited Epstein to the Cursed Charles in 2018 and recently invited Prince Andrew to the set of HBO Studio. Now, I did see somewhere else that Epstein didn't actually get inside the play, but they did allegedly have communications via email to orchestrate him getting tickets. So that pretty much wraps it up for the first installment of this series. We covered 2017 to 2020, which was in some ways the main year where J.K. Rowling came out as transphobic. Already from this we can see that at the core of this descent into transphobic madness is a lack of understanding that gender and biological sex are A, different, but B, can be changed. So if you fundamentally don't believe that trans people can change their gender, or anyone can change their gender, or that there are only two options as well, which is incorrect, then you can't understand the idea that a biological man, to use her language, can turn into a woman, which again is kind of outdated language at this point. But if you fundamentally don't believe that, then any trans woman to J.K. Rowling is still a cis man, and therefore all of the crimes that are commonly permitted by cis men are then applied to trans women, which again is also flawed. You'll see more as the series goes on. You have to understand from her perspective that she's holding on to that mistaken core belief. Now, we all understand that not to be true, and I would hope that at least by the end of this series, anyone that doesn't agree can kind of jump on board and understand why that's just flawed, because we do get outright into intersex denial, lacking of like studies and ignoring of science and the cast review. We got so much to cover, trust me. It's interesting to see how she holds on to that core misunderstanding, and I just sometimes wish people had paid more attention in school, because it's basic biology that you get taught this stuff. It's also ironic that that's what the other side uses, like, this is basic biology, and it's like, well, yeah, then try learning advanced biology if you can't cover the basics, because it's not just a fact of man and woman. There is so much more to life and science and biology. Also, something on a personal note, at this point in time, I am in between 9,000 and 10,000 subscribers. So hopefully through the course of this series that continues to go up. And thank you so much for everyone that joined. If you came here from the Brendan Lee Mulligan video, thank you so much for sticking around. I'm really happy with how well that video is received. But let me know where you are in the journey from 9,000 to 10,000, like drop the number. If you're commenting, just put that in the end, because I'm really interested to see where people see this along that hopeful continual journey. And on that note, if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing so that you can become one of the original 10,000 that ever joined the channel. I have big plans for this channel, but yeah, do consider subscribing if you haven't already, and look forward to the next installments of this series. I'm super excited. It's probably the biggest project I've ever put together. I keep trying to better myself. Eventually I'm going to have to go back to my roots and chill out for a second, but not today. A part of what I want to do for the series as well is do a kind of inspired set design and look for each episode, just to kind of make it a bit more interesting, because just covering all of these tweets is going to be quite sad and depressing, because you honestly just see this descent into, in my opinion, transphobic madness that she goes through. So keep an eye out for the different nods to different channels, creators I like. You'll see hopefully the odd special appearance along the way as well. Let me know in the comments who you think I'm oding to, who you think I'm kind of parodying, if it were. Until then, have a wonderful week and stay fruity.